Welcome to the Style Sports Hub, presented by UF Health Medical Group Orthopaedics.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Sports Hub podcast presented by UF Health Medical Group Orthopaedics. I'm your host, Kyle Coppola. I want to thank all of our partners that make it happen: Lake Center Home Care, Lake Sumter State College, and United Southern Bank. Our podcast available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and more. So check us out and subscribe. It really helps us out. Today, I'm joined by FCA member of the Sumter County community, Michael Huey. Michael, thank you for coming on to the podcast with us.
Kyle, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Michael, you've been involved with FCA the last, about a year or two, I would say, the last couple of years. Tell us a little bit about what you do and sort of how this developed, how you came to be part of the FCA.
So preparing myself for a couple of years. I've actually been full-time for about 5 months. And so I had a good friend of mine that had been with FCA for almost 20 years. And he said, hey, do you know where you live is the only county in the state of Florida that's never had a full-time missions director? And so my wife and I began to pray about it, and God led me in there. My background has been working with athletes for over 25 years, and so it was a perfect fit, and I was excited to get started.
So you've been working with athletes for the last 25 years. Can you tell us what your background is in and sort of the athletes that you've worked with?
Yeah, so grew up in Ohio, attended the Ohio State University. We like to say that, you know, and so was a very productive and active athlete in high school, but went on to run track at Ohio State, became lettered all 4 years in track, and then moved to Florida, started training high school, college, and professional athletes, very successful at a high level. In 2019, got nominated for an honorary PhD in nutrition, so I kind of transitioned into that area, helping athletes with sleep, with nutrition, teaching them how to excel from where they are to a higher level. And so the transition now to being able to go back to my passion, it's funny because you asked that question, Kyle. My wife said when I transitioned out of working with them more of a one-on-one basis, more to doing virtual stuff, she's like, there's just something missing. And so going back to working with now with in the schools, being able to minister to the kids and encourage them. And track season right now has been phenomenal because everybody wants to pull you in different directions. So yeah, it's been great. Yeah,
it's really exciting stuff that you're doing. You've obviously dealt with a large variety of athletes. What are some of the stories, some of the best stories that you've had in the past dealing with athletes?
Well, before we came on today, you and I were talking about some of the things I've been doing behind the scenes. And so one of my favorite athletes is a guy named Mitchell Wilcox, who was a USF grad from Tarpon Springs, Florida, who was an undrafted free agent. And I worked with him clear up until the draft, and then he didn't get drafted, but then he got picked up, and now he's just getting ready to start his 5th year in the NFL as an athlete. And so being able to work with those guys, watch them transition from just hoping that they could make it in the NFL, and then now being in the NFL, it's led to great relationships in there. It's, you know, and even now since I've been in Sumter County, my wife and I just moved to Sumter County a couple weeks ago. And it's been great because we've built relationships with great athletes in this area. And I believe that there's a lot of Mitchell Wilcoxes in Sumter County. So I'm excited to be here.
There's just untapped potential, especially in Sumter County, Lake County, where we're at. It reminds me a lot of Keon Ellis as well. He's an NBA star right now, plays for the Sacramento Kings, sort of went through the process, came through community college a couple of years. Then he ended up at Alabama now with the Sacramento Kings. You talk about Trey Mann. He's an athlete that went through the program at the Villages. Now you get Sam Walters in the Sweet 16 with Alabama.
Yes,
so really exciting stuff we have going on in the community.
Yeah, Sam's great. It's funny that you brought up Sam's name. So one of his grandmother, Terry Tomlinson, is me and my wife, one of my wife's best friends. And so I've been able to pour into Sam's life, been able to be an encouragement to him. And it's just great to watch kids that have came out of this area go and be successful. And as we said before you and I got started on here, I'm excited. I feel like God has positioned me here to be a bigger influence in the kids' lives here and watch more of those stories come out of this area in Lake and Sumter County.
What was that like coming into Sumter County, though, it wasn't built at all? You came in with absolutely nothing going on with the FCA. You come in and you have to build that. What has that been like?
Well, 70 years of ministry in FCA and going into the only county, not knowing anybody, being in Pinellas County for over 25 years and not knowing anybody, I looked at it as an awesome challenge. And so now the fruit from that which you know because we've talked a lot about this.
For sure.
The relationships with coaches, the relationships with principals and administrators. And it's just been amazing. Like my wife and I, we get up every morning and we spend time together and we talk about the influence that we're making, but we also look at the impact that's coming, the things that are coming down the line. I was sharing with you that we're doing a leadership camp at Montverde this year for Lake and Sumter County, and we're hoping to have over 500 athletes from Lake and Sumter County, and we're going to lead them through leadership stuff and develop them into what I believe who God intended them to be. So.
Now, one of the great things about that too is a lot of these kids, they're asking questions, they're interested in what's going on with FCA as well. I think that is a really cool thing that's going on, because a lot of these kids, this is the first time that they have been introduced to it. In a way. So how has that been? Sort of, have you had to approach kids, or have kids just been approaching you?
Well, it's funny. So FCA being around for 70 years, I started to meet teachers and coaches that were introduced through FCA 20 years ago in their schools. Different teachers, different coaches. I met pastors that they have kids at the schools that came to know the Lord 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years ago because of FCA. So there was a presence there, but there was never anybody full-time like myself being there, building relationships with the coaches. At the state basketball tournament, our good friend Colt McDowell and I had the privilege of spending a lot of time together. I went with the team. I went with the Wildwood girls basketball team. That allowed me to build deeper relationship with the coaches. I took and fed the kids before the games, and be able to build deeper relationships with kids is what I believe is what they're looking for. Maybe they're not getting it at home. Maybe they're struggling with some things in school, but now they have a source of someone that's there just to listen, just to serve, just to be there for them, to encourage them. And I think that when I was a kid, that's what I needed, and now I'm able to give that back to the kids.
You talk about giving back a lot too, and we talked with Sammy Smith, who is over in Lake County. Sammy Smith, former Miami Dolphin player, former standout at FSU, running back up there. A fantastic guy, first off. Give a shout out to Sammy Smith. You want to talk about a guy who redeemed himself and who is now partnering with the FCA and doing all this stuff. Sammy Smith is a great guy and probably a role model for you as well.
Yes. So I had the privilege. We had a great big FCA event in Orlando a couple weeks ago. I had the privilege of spending some time with Sammy and his wife. And so every week now we're doing a Bible study, and I get to be with Sammy every Wednesday on that. And just to listen to his passion for kids. And it's funny how what we've started now in Lake and Sumter County has begun to expand. We used to have like 2 or 3 full-time missionaries here in the area, and now we have close to 10.
Wow.
And our goal is to have 15 and 20 so that we're in the schools. We're the only missions organization that's actually in the schools, and being able to be around teachers, I've built relationships with some of the most amazing people, and Sammy has been a super encouragement to me in that area and being able to do that. So
we got more with Michael Huey on the way. We're going to take a short break on our podcast. We'll be right back on the Sports Hub.
Is pain or restricted range of motion keeping you on the sidelines? Get back in the game with expert orthopedic care from UF Health Medical Group Orthopaedics. UF Health Medical Group Orthopaedics provides robotic-assisted surgical joint repairs and replacements, post-operative care, and inpatient rehabilitation services, all close to home, right here in Lake and Sumter counties. And for those unexpected injuries, UF Health Medical Group Orthopaedics offers convenient walk-in and same-day appointments. To learn more or to schedule an appointment with one of their specialists, call 352-323-5665. All
right, everybody, we are back here on the Sports Hub podcast. Kyle Copel alongside Michael Huey with FCA in Sumter County. Thanks for joining us again here, Michael.
It's awesome to be here, brother.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk a little bit about the FCA further and how you get students involved. So a lot of the students you talk to at meets and stuff like that, or events and stuff like that. If you're a student, how do you get involved with FCA?
That's a great question. You know, FCA has, as I said before, it's been around for 70 years, right? It's the longest running ministry in any schools that's actually in the public schools. So I've been able to partner with churches. A lot of the kids go to the churches. I've now got support from over 30 pastors in Sumter County, which I've been told has never been done before in any county. And so it's just building those connections. And what's even more amazing about it is I knew none of these people before I came here. So I have a passion for athletes and for kids and for coaches. And so I just dove in. When I first got here, I got a list of all of the coaches in all 3 schools that I'm in, and I just went to the coaches and I said, hey, I'm just here to serve you. One of the big things that we like to do at FCA is we take them Gatorade and snacks. Kyle, you've seen me at games bringing Gatorade and snacks, and kids are hungry. Not only are they hungry for relationships, but they're hungry for food. And so we know where to meet them at. And so I just started taking and serving, and those relationships built to things that I can't even imagine have happened, like building relationships with basketball coaches. On the way here, 3 coaches reached out and said, hey, can you come this week and speak to the teams? Wow. So building relationships with the coaches leads to athletes. And then I was sharing with Kyle that we had a big event this week in Sumter County in Bushnell, good old Bushnell, Florida, right? Yeah. And we had over 400 kids came. And I had kids coming up saying, hey, I want to get involved. Hey, how can I get involved with FCA? And so I think the most important thing about that is building relationships. And then now we have, which is, I'm grateful to say this, we now have FCA in all 6 schools in Sumter County, which it just warms my heart.
That is awesome. That's never been done before. I mean, honestly, what you guys are building there is absolutely terrific. I also want to. How did you, for kids who are looking at you as inspiration, you came in with absolutely nothing as far as FCA goes, and you build relationships. How did you get comfortable talking to people?
Personal development. I tell this story as a young boy. I grew up in a church where I got on the bus every Sunday and went to church. And at the time, I didn't know the pastor. And just recently, last year, I found out that pastor was Dr. John C. Maxwell, who's one of the greatest leadership development coaches and trainers in the world. He's written over 70 New York Times best-selling books. So about 12 years ago, I started reading his books. And so I learned about how to relate to people. And my passion for sports and leadership and learning how to connect with people. Kyle, I married an encouraging wife also, who encouraged me to continue to build relationships, to continue to just look at the coaches as my friends, right? And so now those friends have led and bled over into the kids, and now all of that probably 15 to 20 years of leadership development has allowed me to have the confidence to go into the schools and do things that no one's really ever done before. And so that's where it started.
Kind is interesting too, because we live in a world where technology rules, and it's hard to grasp kids' sort of attention spans there, which are kind of short. How do you manage that?
That's funny. We were talking about video games and electronics and TikTok and Instagram. We're getting kids off of their phones, right? And I think for me, I said to you before, I have a podcast. And so I started sending the podcast to kids, like letting them listen, like, hey, we saw you have a podcast. Hey, we saw you on YouTube. Yeah. And so giving them a better outlet, because we know, as you said, we're bombarded with a lot of stuff. We'll just call it stuff, right? Stuff that kids are not needing to learn to grow. And so I think that if we can give them an outlet of things that is better for them and healthier for them, I'm all in. Sign me up.
Absolutely. What upcoming initiatives do you have for FCA in the coming months and years, and where do you envision it in Sumter County?
I envision it to have not only just myself here, but as I said to you before we got started, I would like to have 8 to 10 other full-time people in this area. Where, as I said, we're having a leadership camp. I would like to have 400 to 500 kids from Sumter County at leadership camp. We're almost in every sport in all 3 schools now. Wow. There's only 2 sports that I haven't reached yet. that my goal is to reach them before school's out this year, and then let this summer lead up to build up to next year, to being in all the schools, to being with all the coaches, to spend time with them, and just continue to let the kids know that we're there for them, just to serve and just to be a part of their lives and just encourage them.
Yeah, it's so important to have the encouragement these days, because there's a lot of things, whether it's social media, whether it's television, whether it's whatever. There's a lot of negativity I feel in the world right now. And to combat that is very important. And I think a lot of these kids turn to sports in order to combat that.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
So I think sports is the leaders of sports in schools people look up to, even people that don't know a lot about sports, because we know about 60 to 70% of kids are involved in some sport, right? Whether it's even bowling, or golf or whatever. I'm a huge golfer. So what I believe, with my background in nutrition and exercise science and sports and leadership and sports management, it will allow me to bridge that gap in some areas where kids kind of don't know which direction to go, or they don't know who to look up to. And so having kids step up, like next week in Lake County, they're having a big event where they're going to honor all of the leaders. So my goal, back to the goal thing, is next year to have an event where we can honor all of the leaders. The first year is building that basis of what we need. And then next year, we're going to just have a bunch of kids that are leading their schools. And I believe that you'll see, I've just been saying this to my wife every morning as we pray, is I believe that you're going to see a massive impact in the county next year through the schools, through the teachers, but most of all through the students.
Yeah, there's so many great students. You talk about some of the students. John Harding at the Villages, really exciting tight end for the Villages. He'll be back this year. You got Mally Boone over at Sumter, South Sumter, really exciting baseball star over there. A lot of great prospects that you have in Sumter County. You got a couple kids over at Wildwood. I believe Lorenzo Simmons just signed to college. Got a couple other kids over there that just signed, which is really exciting, because we love seeing these kids go and playing at the next level and earning those opportunities, and you're going to help along with that as well.
Yes, and it's encouraging to watch these kids develop, not only develop in their sport, but develop in their faith, to develop in relationships with people. You brought up Mally, probably one of the quietest kids I've ever met in my entire life, but it's allowed me to have a deeper relationship with him. They know when you're there. When you're there to serve, kids will stop what they're doing, come over to you and say, "Hey, Coach Huey." I don't think sometimes they don't know what to call me. They call me Reverend Huey or Coach Huey or Pastor Huey. Anything that they want to call me, as long as I continue to build relationships with them. And I think what you're going to see with some of these kids like Mally, who are quiet but encouraging to their teammates, you're going to see those type of kids be the leaders in the next year to 2 years to 3 years. And even some of the freshmen, we have 8th graders, Kyle, now that are playing varsity sports. As you know, at the state basketball tournament, Coach Brown's daughter, an 8th grader, led their team to a state basketball tournament. And so I believe that you're seeing a younger, and John has a sister that's in 8th grade. That
big family.
Like 8 or 10 kids, I think, right? And so you have an athletic family that leads with their faith, but leads with relationships. And I think that's super important.
Absolutely important. We'll got more with Michael Huey coming up on the Sports Hub next.
Nobody wants an aging family member who is unable to care for themselves to be home alone. Lake Center Home Care believes the best healing happens when you are most comfortable. The company provides exceptional personal care in the comfort and privacy of your own home. Whether you need skilled nursing, physical therapy, home health aides, or companion services, your loved ones will enjoy peace of mind knowing you're being taken care of and treated with respect and dignity. Lake Center Home Care is locally owned and managed with a team of highly qualified professionals who are passionate about taking care of their neighbors. Call 352-315-0050 or visit golchc.com to learn more about this amazing company.
We are back on the Sports Hub podcast with Michael Huey. Michael, thank you for coming on to the program. It's been so insightful talking to you. Such an impact that you're having on the community in more ways than one, for sure. Let's talk about some of the impacts that you're making at the school level, but not just at the school level, but outside the school as well.
Well, it's really amazing just to watch the interaction that I've been able to have with the students, with the administrators of the schools. I was telling Kyle when we were at a basketball game one time, just meeting principals and teachers. A couple weeks ago, I was at a basketball game at South Sumter, and the students had been able to pick a teacher that had impacted their life. And I'm sometimes an emotional guy, so if I get a little bit emotional, forgive me. But watching these kids walk their teachers across and say something encouraging about them. 3 of the teachers came over, and I wear a badge that says my name and says FCA. And one of the teachers came over and said, Michael, are you the full-time person that we've been hearing about? And I said, yes. And she said, I got saved through FCA 20 years ago at this school, and I've been praying for someone to come and start FCA back up at this school. So not only did that lead to that, it led to being able to her connecting me with other people, connecting me with pastors, connecting me with business owners now in the area. And so I've been able to meet more people in the last 3 months or 4 months since my wife and I moved here than I probably ever did when I lived 4 years in Claremont, just because we didn't know anybody. And now here we are in the midst of a community that is growing fast. The village where the high school is growing so fast. We just moved into a brand new home, and now they just told us they're going to build 400 more homes in our community. So being here in this community has allowed us to build relationships with pastors. I have relationships with over 30 to 40 different pastors right now that I get to meet with them. I get to meet with their families. They're coming to the schools. They're serving. And so it's just building and lasting impact, I think.
You said that teacher prayed for something like that to happen. Obviously, her prayers were answered. Yes. I want to also talk about how FCA sort of gives the kids and teachers and everybody the resources they need, sort of behind the scenes as well, because obviously you talk about the fellowship of athletes and everything like that. It's a tight-knit group. It's like a brotherhood and sisterhood. But then you have outside the athletics, the classroom and everything like that, the churches and stuff like that, how they're involved with everything. How does that all intermingle?
Well, it's funny because each FCA, we call them huddles, okay? And everybody says, what's a huddle? And a huddle is different aspects of it. There's individual sports huddles, and then there's school huddles. So like, for instance, at the Villages, Tuesday morning, and I'll make an inside joke today, I forgot that today was spring break, and I went to the huddle, and of course there was no one there. And then I realized on my way there that I was going to be the only one there. But we have one every Tuesday morning, and we get about 75 to 100 kids, and it's led by a teacher or an administrator. And so we have the resources with FCA to be able to help them develop leaders. So the last couple weeks of the school, now new leaders are coming in because you have seniors graduating. And so what we've been able to do is create a curriculum that when a new person comes in, we can train them so that when they get up in front of their classmates, they're confident, they know what they're going to say. And I think when you didn't have a full-time person here doing that, it kind of left the teachers at bay of, what's next? What can we do next to encourage these kids? And so when we came in with the E3 training that FCA allows us to teach, I've been hearing about it all week. The kids are going through it. We have it at the middle schools. We have it at the high schools. And it's allowed us to just expand into the churches. Yeah. Like some of the churches have said, hey, do you mind if we use this in some of our youth groups and stuff? So it's structure, I think, that brings a lasting legacy. We say we want to leave a legacy, but I think being a part of something like this, we're living a legacy that will eventually leave a legacy. For
certain, especially in our community that's growing so rapidly. You talk about the Villages. Yes. You talk about all of Sumter County. Bushnell is exploding with growth. All sorts of areas are experiencing that rapid growth, and I think that there certainly was a need for it, especially not just Lake County, but Sumter County, especially that was without it for so long. And it's just great to see that's just exploding. It's booming in the area, and it's been needed for so long. And
long time.
It's very thankful for what you're doing and providing that to all the children. And what's your advice to kids when you're like learning, when you're your first pitch basically to these kids? What do you say to them?
Well, I let them know that I'm there, that I'm not going anywhere. I think a lot of times in sports, the aspect of sports, you and I've talked about this, it's changed a lot. Like, we may have a coach one week and then the coach may be gone the next, right? And so for me, I want the kids to know that I'm going to be there, that I'm not going anywhere, that, over the summer that I'm going to be there, that I'm going to be doing camps, that I'm going to be at the schools. And you know what's funny about that, Kyle? When I'm not there, guess what they say? Where are you?
Yeah.
I'll go, hey, where have you been? And I'll say, hey, I was spending a couple of days at this school. I was spending a couple of days at that school. And so I think when you build tight-knit relationships with kids, for instance, I mentioned to you earlier that we do Gatorade and snacks for all the teams, right? Well, the last couple months, the food bank has not had as much Gatorade as we normally get. This month, we had none. So one of the pastors came up to me at a small church this past weekend at the event that we had, and he pulled me and my wife aside, and he said, hey, here's what I'm going to do for you. He said, I'm having a men's conference at the end of the month, and the entry fee, the registration fee has changed. He said, it's not going to be just $20. It's going to be $20 in a case of Gatorade. And he said, would you be okay if I gave you 120 cases of Gatorade for May and June? Wow. And so it's like what the impact that you make is allowing kids now to know that it's not just me that's there for them, it's the local churches, it's their coaches who are now people of faith. It's amazing that I've been able to, I think this is probably one of the biggest impacts that I got to see during basketball season was kids saw me praying with their coaches. At the state basketball tournament, right after the announcements, before they went to introduce the starting lineup, Coach McDowell and I had been praying together before every game. And my wife said, I wonder if it's going to happen this day because there's just so much going on at the state basketball tournament. And after the national anthem, he walked all the way away from his team as they were getting ready to be announced and grabbed my hand, and we were able to pray together.
Wow.
And I think that made a lasting impact, not only in my life and in Colt's life, but the teammates, the fans, the villages travel very well. Yeah. So I received probably 30 or 40 messages about the impact that we've made with the kids from the people.
That's amazing. That's the type of impact that you're looking for in the community, and that's so awesome that you're able to provide that, especially with the villages. I mean, they had quite the season for the basketball season. Again, getting back to the state semifinals. Didn't end up getting a championship, but was quite the role for them. Wildwood also getting to the state semifinals this year with the girls team. That was they almost made it. A tough loss versus Hawthorne, but a great group of people over there at Wildwood.
Amazing people. It's really funny. This past weekend, my wife and I did announcements at church, and as I'm leaving, I saw Coach Brown, I saw Zoe, I saw Coach Harrison, I saw his whole family sitting in the back of our church. Yeah. And it just warmed my heart that I've been able to build relationships that have extended beyond the playing arena, sports, and now it's led out into the community. So,
for final thoughts, what is your final thoughts as far as where this is headed?
I want to make the biggest impact that's ever been made through FCA in this county. As I said, it's been around for 70 years. My grandmother told me that this day would come. This day would come where I would make a massive, lasting impact in a community, and that it would transform lives for eternity. And so, my wife is my inspiration. She's one of the most incredible humans that's ever walked the face of the earth, and she wrote on my mirror in my bathroom a couple weeks ago. It says Scripture, Haggai, verse 2 and verse 9, and it says that the latter days of my life will be greater than the former days of my life. And so I know I don't look 50, soon to be 56 years old, Kyle.
Definitely not.
But I believe that this latter season of my life will be the greatest impact, not only in my life, but in the lives of students, coaches, athletes, and most of all, communities.
Michael Huey, thank you for coming on to the Sports Hub podcast. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Want to thank all of our partners that make it happen. Once again, UF Health Medical Group Orthopaedics. I also want to thank Lake Center Home Care, Lake Sumter State College, and United Southern Bank. And remember that our podcast available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and more. So check us out and subscribe. It really helps us out. Make sure to visit lakeandsumterstyle.com for all your Sports Hub needs. We have a Sports Hub section on there. You can check out all the cool stuff that we have on there, student athlete highlights, games and much more on there as well. So make sure to check that out. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Sports Hub podcast. Thanks for joining us.
This has been the Style Sports Hub, presented by UF Health Medical Group Orthopaedics.